Hi, I'm Stephanie Hutchins, author of Transformation After Trauma, Embracing Post-Traumatic Growth. And why I'm coming on today is to discuss the question of, how do I handle the anniversary date of a trauma? So I'm not brought back to that moment like it's happening today. And I'm very familiar myself with anniversary dates bringing you right back as though you're experiencing them in the moment, even if it happened many years before. And if you're not familiar, I have a very long history of abuse starting in childhood. But to answer this question, I want to talk about what happened when I was 25. So when I was 25, I found the first man who ever showed me that I was deserving of love and respect. I found him dead. And that was in 2008. And for a few years afterward, when the anniversary would come up, I would fall into a very deep depression. And I would see images of him and the way he looked when I found him dead on the floor. And I would remember how he was cold to the touch when I touched him. I can remember all of it. I can remember calling, I can remember calling 911. I can just remember all aspects of it. I remember when the first few years after it happened, I remembered the event like it was happening again, even though it was 1, 2, 3, and 4 years. Beyond the event of finding him dead. And so what I started to do is on the anniversary date, I specifically started to plan something else than I would normally do. So something outside of my routine. I started to do something else that day. So I would have like something planned with a friend or family member. I would go out for a hike. I would have something else to do that day, and preferably something that would take up the entire day and something that was enjoyable, okay, to do on the anniversary date. And I would plan it ahead of time. Okay. And so I'm saying all this because this is what I recommend to you. Okay. If you're in a similar circumstance where you're being brought back into the moment, like it's actually happening on the anniversary date of your own trauma, then I encourage you ahead to plan in advance something else to do on that day. Okay. And preferably this should be something enjoyable. And the reason you want to have, there's a couple of reasons for doing this. One is serves as a distraction. Okay. So it just keeps your mind off from the event. But why you preferably want to have it be something enjoyable and not necessarily a reminiscing of this person. Like I don't actually encourage that either. I don't encourage you, and this is going to seem very odd considering that I'm talking about losing a loved one. I chose not to memorialize him on that day. I chose not to focus on that day of being a remembrance of him. I chose other, times like around his birthday or his mom's birthday or just other, Christmas, other times that I didn't associate with complete devastation. So I have chosen to not memorialize the date of his death. And that I found immensely beneficial. And that's why I'm encouraging you to consider on that anniversary date to not revisit it, okay, by going to the gravesite. If it's a loss of a person that you experienced, I encourage you not to rehash the incidents of a traumatic event like an assault, okay? I encourage you to do something that is completely unrelated to the person or the set of circumstances that you experienced that day. And the reason I encourage this is because you want to begin to replace that date, on the calendar with a different set of sensations and feelings. And so you want to start thinking of it more as either a neutral day or an enjoyable day. And I found it to be extremely effective. So effective that his anniversary, the date of his death comes up, and I usually don't remember now for until a few days after. And I'll be like, huh, what date is it? And I'll be like, oh, the anniversary date, of his passing was a few days ago. And I'm always a little stunned. Even today, this past year, the anniversary date of his death is in March. And even this year, it passed. And I was like, huh. And for a moment, I have this instinct to apologize to him, and say, I'm sorry I didn't, remember. But at the same time, I have this sense of like relief, that I am no longer being brought back into this devastating time of my life. I've completely broken that time of, like, I've completely divorced that date with his death. So now that date can pass and I no longer think of it as something devastating because I no longer link it to something harmful that happened to me. So in many ways, I'm very proud of myself, even though part of me feels a pang of sadness that I didn't remember his passing. I also feel an immense sense of relief that that I didn't remember, because for a few years after his passing, I would be completely depressed for the entire day and sometimes a few days after, and I was really not able to function. And I said before that I've experienced a number of traumas, and there was a few sexual assaults that I experienced. I've experienced a number, but there were a few that initially the dates stuck in my mind, and every year I would revisit. And so from an early age, I learned that this was an effective strategy. And I would always have something else planned for that day. I would engage, when I was young, when I was a teenager, I would engage in art projects. I'd have an art project that I'd do the whole day. So I'd have a painting project that I knew I would engage in, or if it was a day I was at school, I, make sure that was filled with volunteering or sports. It was just a full day. Okay. And really, I no longer with any, even though I've had a series of trauma, there's not any date on the calendar any longer where I am sent back. Okay. Now, that's not to say that I'm never ever sent back thinking about, my traumas. It does happen, but it doesn't happen on specific dates. Okay. There may be other triggers for them, but to break that link with a date in a traumatic event, you need to begin to replace that date with something else. Again, so over time, the date is associated with something beneficial or something neutral, like it's just another day. And that's what's eventually started to happen with me. Again, first, I'd start putting something enjoyable, okay, or full of distractions. And after a number of years of doing that, it just became a neutral day. I no longer had to put something special on that day because it was just another day. And so I encourage you to try it. And again, don't wait until the anniversary date, okay, to think of something to do, okay, at least a few days, preferably a week or 2 weeks or so in advance, or even farther, depending on how severe your overwhelm becomes on that date. I'd start planning in advance, okay? And then I'd also make sure that you have a plan in place for if you do get sent backward. Like, let's say it's the first year anniversary, okay, or the second year anniversary from the trauma. and it's still, the wounds are still pretty tender. Even if you have a distraction in place and you're doing something really fun that day, it is possible that you might be sent back, and think about that traumatic event on that day. And so what I encourage you to do, in addition to planning a distraction, something fun to do that day, also have a plan in place for what you're going to do if that feeling of overwhelm comes up. Okay. And actually, I encourage that for daily practice. Okay. So I just said a little bit ago that even though the anniversary dates no longer overwhelm me, they're just neutral days to me now, there are still times something will trigger me to go back to a memory of a really painful experience. And so I have developed a set of tools that I use to handle that overwhelm. Okay. So sometimes I may try, breathing. I sit back and I have breathing techniques that I use, and I'll sit back and do them for a minute or two. Sometimes I may stand up from whatever I'm doing, step away and go for a walk, or I may do something that distracts me, or I might call a friend. One thing I do like to do is and I'm looking at my phone right now because I have on my phone a couple of things that I do anytime I need to smile, laugh, or just stop a period of overwhelm from getting worse. And I have in my YouTube app created folders for videos that are like themed. Okay. So like if I'm wanting to sing or dance, I have folders for songs that will help shift the current state I'm in. So if I'm feeling sad and depressed and overwhelmed, I have a set of songs that will not further that set of feelings, but change what I'm feeling. So will encourage me to sing or dance. Okay. And at first it might be hard, but what it'll do is very quickly start shifting what I'm focusing on, and help me focus and not go down that rabbit hole, okay, any further of thinking about the traumatic event. Another thing I do on my phone is in my photos, I've created one folder that says smile and another one that says laugh. And what I've done is I've gone through like the search engine like Google, or if I find it on social media, different pictures that either make me smile or laugh, and I save them to my phone and then I move them into that folder. And so anytime I'm needing to elicit those emotions, I go to those folders and I look at them, and immediately like I'm already starting to feel a little better. And so I encourage you to just fill your your toolbox with as many tools as possible to combat those feelings of overwhelm, whether it be on anniversary dates or just any day. Okay. And I really love answering questions that people have, specifically from healing from trauma and coping and dealing with the immense pain that comes in the aftermath. And so so please, at any point, reach out to me and let me know any questions you have, and I'll be happy to answer them. And I wish you well on your healing journey. Take care. Thanks for listening.